Nintendo has now broken a historic, insane record in the Switch generation that you actually have to go back to the company's origins of them producing home video game consoles to compare it to. And no, we're not talking about any type of sales figure in this video. We do, of course, know just how successful the Switch is at 141 million official units now in the hands of gamers. But no, not tied to unit sales, but rather the record that is being discussed today has to do with how long it has been since Nintendo has released their last home console. And in the Switch generation, we are now in the longest period ever in between launches for mainline home console hardware from Nintendo. And of course, it's a little bit of a unique situation with this being their first hybrid console, but I want to have a broad conversation today of just what the Switch has really created for Nintendo in terms of success since 2017 in March when it originally launched, and also talk about how Nintendo may follow up their home console transitions from here, because while we know that we are approaching the Nintendo Switch 2 generation, there's also a conversation to be had about just how long the successor model may indeed last on the market before we go on to some probably brand new idea, or maybe even a more iterative console past that. So we're going to unpack all those exact details in this video. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And with that, I want to first hop over to VGC, where they have a nice detailed typed up article outlining all of the following. It's official, no Nintendo console has lasted as long as the Switch without being replaced. It's now been nearly 2,700 days since launch. Since its worldwide launch on March 3rd, 2017, 2,687 days have passed without the arrival of a successor console, meaning the Switch's lifespan has officially beaten Nintendo's previously longest lasting console, the Famicom, which lasted 2,686 days. Assuming the successor to Nintendo Switch doesn't launch before March 1st, 2025, Switch could go on more than 2,920 days without the launch of newer hardware. Since Nintendo's first breakout hardware, the Famicom, known as Nintendo Entertainment System outside of Japan, the gap between hardware launches became progressively shorter until its previous best-selling console, Wii, arrived in 2006 and lasted almost exactly 6 years before Wii U launched. Wii U, which turned out to be one of the company's biggest sales flops, then enjoyed the fewest days pre-successor, 1,566, as Nintendo rushed ahead with its new plans for Nintendo Switch. Of course, Nintendo Switch is a hybrid console which can also be played portably, and in terms of Nintendo's longest lasting handheld, Switch is still far behind the original Game Boy, which enjoyed a massive 4,352 days before launch of its full successor, the Game Boy Advance. Switch does, however, beat the Nintendo DS, the company's best-selling hardware ever, which lasted 2,288 days until the Nintendo 3DS. You can then see the breakdown of all of the traditional home consoles from Nintendo, starting back in 1977 with Color TV Game, 2,235 days, Famicom 2,686, Super Famicom, aka the SNES, one of my favorite systems of all time, 2,041 days, Nintendo 64, 1,909 days, Nintendo GameCube, 1,892 days, the Wii, a whopping 2,191 days, the Wii U, 1,566 days, and now the Switch officially crossing 2,687 days at the time of filming this video. So when you talk about the reasoning for Nintendo continuing to support the Switch today and into the foreseeable future, it really has to do with these massive, huge hit sales that we're seeing, not only from a hardware perspective at 141 million absolutely being like an astronomical number for Nintendo to hit for a home console or hybrid console rather, it also has to do with the software sales being well over 1 billion plus total software attached to the Nintendo Switch has been moved over the console's life cycle, and we're not slowing down on that front. Like, new software that launches is still performing incredibly well in the Nintendo Switch generation, and I do believe that when it comes to the methodology of whether or not Nintendo will continue to do long-lasting generations and actually break the record of the Switch going forward, with the Switch 2 being maybe the longest-lasting console on the market, I think you see a correlation if you look at all the history that we just walked through there, which has to do with the console's overall sales and momentum. If sales die off and momentum slows, Nintendo definitely gets some pressure from investors, and just internally, they have to be a for-profit company at the end of the day and continue to churn out a profit if they want to remain in business. Well, then the pressure is on to start to potentially shift to a new product that the market will maybe receive better than the last product you launched. And in the case of the Nintendo Switch, we're now seeing it be the longest home console generation ever, just simply because Nintendo has not really seen the full drop off of a cliff sales momentum point. They're still forecasting 13.5 million units for the upcoming fiscal year that we are in right now, and there's no clear indication if they will hit that yet or not, but there is a lot of levers they can pull, such as price drops that they haven't even attempted yet. Not to mention, obviously, with things like Zelda Echoes of Wisdom around the corner, and by the way, you can pre-order that at select retailers right now, and you may want to get your pre-orders in if you want some of the Wave 1 stock. I don't know how long Nintendo will produce that Switch Lite system, but they're definitely doing a lot to target double dipping from the consumer in the Switch's generation, and it's honestly the console that has made the most sense for double dipping, because with it being a hybrid form factor, you get a few docks in your house and a few different Switches, and it's actually really nice. You can take one to any room in your home and dock it in the dock that's already set up there, and you can quickly switch out whichever console that whoever wants to play on. If somebody has the save file for Smash Bros with all the characters and DLC, they can pop their Switch in and you're playing on that one. Then somebody else has Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and all of the DLC on that one, you can rotate it to that Switch console. So they've made it really easy and kind of created the idea that it's normal to have multiple Switches in the same household, and all the special editions we've seen launch for this family of systems has also no doubt helped inflate their sales numbers for the same consoles for collectors, diehard Nintendo fans like myself, when I shouldn't be spending $200 on an Echoes of Wisdom Zelda Switch Lite, but I'm gonna have to do it just because I need that Golden Triforce mini Switch in my collection. But when you then shift the conversation to whether or not we will see the Switch 2 maybe follow a similar release pattern where we might be talking about the successor model to the Switch being the longest lasting home console or hybrid console at that point in time ever in Nintendo's history, well, I think that largely remains to be seen, and I think you can track all of that or correlate all of that to the sales performance of that Switch. So if the Switch 2 is vastly successful and it's doing the similar type of software and hardware numbers that the current Switch family of systems have achieved and then some, well, then I think it does turn into one of the longest generations. And if we see it die off significantly quicker than we have in the Switch's generation, then I think at that point we're probably going to see a relatively shorter generation, maybe more in the realm of the 5, close to 6 years really being the maximum. Like talking about 7 or 8 full years that have gone by for Nintendo having a home console on the market and not having a new one even announced is honestly uncharted territories and kind of crazy to say out loud. I don't think that future consoles will necessarily last quite as long as well, just due to the fact that the market's going to drastically change over the next 5 to 7 years, in my opinion. I think games will be played largely on what device you want them to be played on. All of the mini PC handhelds we're seeing enter the market. Sony's probably going to be coming out with a portable console at some point, like a PSP revival, if you will. Xbox is definitely working on something behind the scenes right now to make Xbox portable in gaming once again. And with that, the big selling point that made Nintendo Switch the most unique gameplay experience out there, which was the ability to play your full-scale AAA games at home or on the go regardless, it will be considered a normal feature in gaming, and Nintendo will probably, in my opinion, by the time we talk about putting a bow on the Switch 2's generation, potentially go back to the drawing board a little bit and really create something new and wacky as they typically do. They may come up with an idea that we don't know we're into, but we'll be very surprised to see once they figure it out and flesh it out and implement it. So we'll have to wait and see how it ultimately unfolds for Nintendo. I personally could be happy in the hybrid era until the end of time for Nintendo. Like, the Switch has quite honestly become my favorite Nintendo console ever, and that's with all the nostalgia that I have for the GameCube generation. That was probably like the peak of gaming for me, and N64 and SNES being close seconds and thirds. Like, the Switch has really outdone it if you look at the library from a whole, all the games that are playable, and the fact that you can play them handheld or in dock mode on a TV. Like, it's quite honestly a fantastic experience. And when you talk about that just being more graphically capable, having a lot more third-party support likely with the successor model, and what kind of crazy new ideas are we going to see Nintendo come up with that additional processing power for their first-party games? Like, it's definitely an exciting time to be a Nintendo fan. They're vastly successful as a company. They're doing movies, media, they're doing giant theme parks all across the world. Like, no signs of slowing down, but rather things ramping up for Nintendo. And it's a really unique moment to look back and realize that we've crossed a milestone of the Nintendo Switch being the longest ever home console right now, officially in the books today, and we don't even know when we're getting the successor model in our hands at this point in time, although we do know Nintendo will announce it no later than March of 2025, and I still think we're getting that announcement fall of this year. But let me know in the comments down below what you make of all of this. Do you think the Switch has been historically Nintendo's best console so far, and it's personally your favorite? Do you have another favorite console, and why? And do you think that the Switch 2 will also have a similar trajectory where it follows a similar sales pattern to the current Switch, and it maybe sticks around for just as long as Nintendo's flagship device? Or do you think it's maybe poised to have a much shorter generation, more similar to that of GameCube, Wii U, and some of the other consoles that have had shorter lifespans over the course of history? So thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. Make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.